entering medicine. When I say medicine, I mean nurses and doctors, because as Dr. Bhattacharya expressed, I think nurses form the core of any medical organization. Hospitals cannot run, doctors cannot function, patients cannot go out well smiling without nurses. Doctors can many times be dispensed with, nurses are indispensable. So throughout, whenever I say medicine, I mean doctors, nurses, and many times many other allied specialties. It's a teamwork. But then I think medicine as a profession entering medicine is one of the most impactful professions. When we become physicians and surgeons and nurses, we commit ourselves to a lifetime of learning and service. It's not a trade that one learns to ply. When I was in final year MBBS, there used to be a textbook of medicine called Cecil's Textbook of Medicine. I don't know if it is still around, In the edition, this was in 1985-86, there was an incident narrated in the first few pages of the book. There is this physician in rural America, and his association is coming to meet in his hometown that year, and he is the chairman, the president of that meeting, and he is expected to deliver the presidential oration. So that is the highest point of his career. And so the meeting starts, everything is set, he is going to be delivering the oration. Somebody comes and whispers something in his ears, and he excuses himself and goes out. His turn to deliver the oration comes, the man is missing. Somebody else reads out the presidential oration on his behalf. Later in the evening, when the meeting is about to close, the man returns tired, and when asked what happened, he says one of his patients died, and he felt that it was more important for him to be with the family in their hour of grief than deliver the presidential oration. And that left a very, very deep impression on my mind. I think that physician epitomizes, so many things of what an ideal physician or a nurse or a healthcare practitioner should be, chiefly about compassion. One cannot master the art and science of practicing medicine or nursing in the years of graduation, not even in the years that you spend in postgraduate and super specialty education. It takes years of hard experience and the ability to introspect and the humility to learn. My professor, Dr. S. Krishnamurthy, from whom I learned so many things, used to say that, the science, today's research is tomorrow's medicine. In the same breath, he would also say that the fruits of science, if they are not available to everybody, then that kind of science is worthless. The sick man's penny must go back to the sick man, he would say. And all that we do, is to ensure that patients are put in the center of everything that we do. So there comes out my paper, I'm losing track. So, there is so much of explosion of knowledge today, and today we know the molecular basis of disease, and there is also immense development in technology that allows us to harness this knowledge to personalize treatment for many individuals. And so it is but natural that all our learning and teaching and practice focuses on this aspect of medicine. It is very important that we stay abreast with the knowledge base that is developing and use it for the welfare of our patients. That is a basic tenet of practicing medicine, which cannot be contradicted. But many times what is often lost is the other equally important aspect of healthcare practice, that is developing an intimate and sometimes sacred relationship with the patient and the family. As Francis Peabody said in 1925, a central tenet of clinical work is interest in humanity. For the secret of health care, the secret of patient care depends upon the care for the patient. Treatment of the disease can be impersonal. We can look at the genes, we can look at the molecules, we can look at the latest drugs, and the whole thing can be totally impersonal. But the care of the patient has to be completely personal and, if possible, personalized. We live in an unequal world. We are born unequal in an unequal world. I believe those of us who are endowed with knowledge, opportunities, wealth, abilities beyond our needs, hold it in trust for use for others who do not have these. And again, coming back to what Dr. Krishnamurti said, it is the job of the treating physician to find the resources to treat the patient. He would say, he would iterate and reiterate ad nauseum on this, and that is what many of us have deeply ingrained in our minds. Sita, my wife, helped me make this decision to move to Silchar several years ago. When we moved to Silchar, I had very little idea about the hardships patients face in accessing healthcare in many parts of the country. All we had was, if we help patients with low cost or no cost treatment, they would all come for treatment. That was the idea that I came to Silchar with. And so that's how we started. We started providing accommodation and treatment in the hospital. Sumit, used to be our medical oncologist those days, and on rounds with him one day, we saw a child eating puffed rice soaked in water with long green chilies, which is available for 4 rupees, 5 rupees outside. As soon as the hospital started growing, whole lot of shops mushroomed on the street outside. And so, Sumit was horrified, what is this happening? And quickly we started a kitchen to provide food for patients. And so, and then we got a grant from the Indo-American Cancer Association to start a department for palliative care. And as part of that, we had to make a presentation in Kolkata in 2011. So hurriedly we went back looking at the data that we had, and we found that 30% of our patients came back for oral morphine. Many of you would know that morphine, the quantity of morphine consumed, is an index of the quality of palliative care. And if 30% patients came back for morphine, it means a vast majority of them went back home and died in misery. I was a moron. It did not impact on me at that time. I thought people come from far off, travel is expensive, and so they're not coming back for palliative care. They're not coming back for oral morphine. But we were treating those whom we were treating with the intent to cure. We were giving free treatment, accommodation, food. They all must be doing very well. That was a presumption I had. And at that meeting, I actually had the gumption to say that only 30% of patients come back for oral morphine, but everybody else whom we are treating with intent to cure are doing very well. Even as we made that statement, we were wondering, we've not verified this. So when we came back, I requested my colleagues in the registry to look at what was happening. And Amit comes back and tells me that nearly 60% of patients who walk into our OPDs did not come back for a second visit. And out of the 40% that initiated treatment, not even 28 people completed treatment. That means all that we were doing was a waste. We were not changing anybody's lives. And we could not figure out as to why this was happening. We were doing everything that was right. We were giving low-cost treatment, we were giving food, we were giving accommodation. So what more could we do? And then looking at our data, we realized more than 80% of our patients were daily wage earners. They earn, they eat, and they have large families, often one earning member. And so they often have to make this cruel decision of not coming back for treatment. So in 2012, we took two policy decisions. We decided that everybody who comes into the OPD will go back with a follow-up date. So my colleague Abhijit wrote down a software. I opened today's date, there are 100 names. As we treat them or see them, their name disappear, left behind are the people who have not come back. And then we get on the phone, we gave phones to all our OPD in charges, ward in charges, residents, registry. And so they get on the phone and call the patient. You were supposed to have come back for chemotherapy, you defaulted. What is your problem? Come, we will help you. The second thing we did was, we started providing ad hoc employment on campus for a caregiver of the patient. We started with 30 rupees plus food for the patient. And now we pay about, 250 rupees or 300 rupees per day along with food for a caregiver. Immediately next year, we were now smarter. We went back and audited as to what is happening. And we found that almost 55% of patients complete prescribed treatment. That's a good figure when compared to 28%. But then, if Tata Memorial Hospital or Cancer Institute says that they treat 50% of patients coming to them, it is a very good number because most patients in Mumbai will come from outstation. They will come for a diagnosis, for staging and for an opinion on treatment. They will go back to their home stations and have treatment locally. But for us, we are the last stage. Beyond us, there is nobody to go back to. And so if I treat 50% of my patients, I am doing a bad job. For me, I must be treating almost 80-90% of patients. In 2013, I actually went to Delhi and I heard a lady called Harmala Gupta. Many of you would have heard of her. She runs a voluntary organization in Delhi looking at palliative care. I heard her speak, and Delhi is a rich place, a lot of money is there, but that's not the thing. The whole palliative care program was very well organized. Delhi was divided into 7 sectors. They had doctor, nurse, palliative care specialists. But what struck me most was the whole program was free of cost. We also had a home care program, and all of the time, we would be bothered who will pay for the petrol, who will pay for the Foley catheter, will the driver collect the money, will he give a receipt, all sorts of silly questions, which was timing the growth of home care. So when we came back, we took a quick decision that we didn't know where the money was going to come from, but we said all home care will be free. Along with visiting families and patients who were sick, who were unable to come to the hospital, we also started visiting homes of people who were not coming back for treatment. So see, in the organization there was a perennial argument, everybody would quarrel with me, that anybody who comes and cries, you say free of cost, but they all have money at home and they're cheating you. When we started making home visits, we found for first hand, that there's no money in patients' homes. They all live barren lives, yet they will cheerfully offer you tea and puri. You can neither say yes, nor can you say no. Their children would not have eaten, and quickly this argument disappeared from the hospital. Today, the whole organization is on the same page. Anybody who comes and says they don't have money, we just accept it. We don't ask them to prove, that they are poor, and we look about ways to find resources to treat them. That year, in 2014, when we went back to analyze what is happening, nearly 68%, 70% of patients completed prescribed treatment. Then what happened? The Department of Information Technology in the government of India had a telemedicine software. And everybody looks at the Northeast, so they wanted to implement it in the Northeast. And no government agency will touch a non-government agency with a barge pole. There is a very deeply ingrained mistrust between the two. And so they chose to work with the local NIT. The director of the local NIT at that time, Dr. Deshpande, for some reason decided to work with us. And so the telemedicine, as part of the telemedicine study, we established one telemedicine center in 2 of the districts around us. Earlier what used to happen was, somebody from Silchar would travel about 130 kilometers, 140 kilometers to Churaibadi just to see one patient and come back, From a public health point of view, that is foolish. But for me as an organization, as a hospital, every sparrow has to be counted. And so for us it was very important to ensure that everybody who needs treatment is attended to. So we would make that trip, and then we would leave in the morning. Roads were a challenge, and by the time we come back it would be late in the night, and our admin officer would be waiting. Where have the people gone? They've not come back. And so with the telemedicine software, we put one telemedicine center in each of these districts. We trained paramedical staff to run this, and now all the follow-up, all the home care for these districts happen from the district headquarters. On a typical Karimganj clinic day, we do a clinic once a month, and all other days, we have home visits and awareness and preventive programs going on. On a typical Karimganj clinic day, we would see anywhere between 100 and 150 patients. Patients don't have to now come all the way to Silchar. And then, small things, see, when we treat patients for daily wages, every day counts. If we say you come today, come back tomorrow for an endoscopy, then they come endoscopy, now you say you come back 3 days later for a biopsy, then they come 3 days later, you say now you need immunohistochemistry, come back another 7 days, they will all fall through the cracks. So our whole organization is now geared to fast forwarding everything, fast tracking everything. So the biggest problem we had was in histopathology, and so what we did is we quickly trained ourselves to do frozen section histopathology. So I take a biopsy now, in 2 hours we will have the report. So our target is patient comes today, by tomorrow evening we should have the blood workup, the endoscopy, the imaging and the biopsy report. The entire diagnosis and staging should be done. And then we give them a plan, they will go back, we will also look for resources to help them. And so this helps reduce dropouts. We used to charge 150 rupees or 120 rupees as consultation valid for a month, any number of doctors, any number of visits. But then we realized for cancer care they have to come back again and again and again and again, and so it's a disincentive. So we quickly did our math and we said 500 rupees one-time payment, lifetime, no further charges. Dental care, which is so important in cancer treatment and follow-up, patients would not go every time, they have to have some teeth adjusted or extracted, they have to pay 10 rupees, 50 rupees, 40 rupees, they will not go. So we took the same policy, one payment of 500 rupees, after that for a lifetime, all dental care free. We did this with several facilities. Same way with immunohistochemistry, the biopsy charges were some 300 rupees or 400 rupees, we said 500 rupees and no charges for immunohistochemistry. The pathologist is empowered, whenever she needs immunohistochemistry done, she doesn't have to ask anybody. The payment is already taken care of and the pathology report with the IHC. So everything gets fast forward, So I used to think some time ago that the ad hoc employment program was our trump card. That is why so much is happening. So 2 years ago we actually audited all that is happening, and we found we had given employment to only about 40 or 50 patients. But our compliance follow-up was much more than that. And what we realized is most of our patients are afraid of our hospitals. They are put off by the doctors, by the nurses, by the bewildering amount of investigations, go here, go there, and they are afraid. And when we offer them employment, when we offer them concessions, when we call them on the phone, when we visit their homes, we actually build their confidence. No one activity actually made the difference. All of it, they're all actually confidence building measures, and all of it together improves the compliance, improves the trust and confidence that patients have on the organization. Long ago we realized that just sitting in a hospital, we will not be able to change anybody's lives. Patients come with advanced disease, breast cancers, they will come with, I'm sure it happens here also, they come with, cancers which are 10, 12, 15, and we actually had a woman who had such a large cancer, she made a basket out of her sari and carried the breast cancer in her sari, and so it is terrible, people come with cheek cancers, through and through you can see there is maggots creeping out, there is hemorrhage, and they will not come till then, And so if we have to change the way the community looks at healthcare, we have to go to the community. And so we looked at a variety of models, experimented a whole variety of models, and finally we came to, we ran a project with the ASHA, saying that, they are the most common healthcare worker in the community. Each ASHA is responsible for 1,000 population. If you're looking at screening an entire community, you cannot find a better workforce. But there are a lot of objections. ASHA are only 8th class, some of them are only 5th class, 5th class, they cannot use computers, they don't know, they'll damage, organs if they start examining. Whole lot of objections were there. So we ran a pilot and we had to answer 4 questions, Will the ASHA be willing? They said ASHA is overworked. And we did a time motion study and we found that the ASHA worked for about 12 days out of a 26-day monthly work schedule. And so they had time. They were willing to do it. We trained them and they proved, totally competent. We picked up out of a 50 or 60,000 population that we screened in the community. They picked up about 200 or 250 cancers and pre-cancers, but nearly 3,000 diabetics and hypertensives. And so we realized that, cancer is caused by, all of us know, tobacco, alcohol, improper diet, lack of exercise, and sometimes untreated infections. If you take care of these 5, in India you will probably end up preventing about 70% of cancers. But then, what causes cardiovascular disease? Diabetes, hypertension, stroke, COPDs. That is, all of them are caused by tobacco, alcohol, diet, exercise. So when we address cancer prevention by removing tobacco, by removing alcohol, by promoting exercise, by promoting healthy diets, we prevent cancer, but we also prevent a whole lot of other diseases. We reduce the number of strokes, we reduce the number of cardiovascular diseases, we make diabetes better controlled, hypertension. So in other words, we are actually improving the health of the community. Now the health of, if somebody falls ill at home in my house, who will take care? I have to take care. If somebody falls ill in our locality, who will take care? We have to take care. The Chief Minister or the Prime Minister or the Health Minister will not come to take care of these people. We are responsible for the health of our families, our localities, our villages. And so when we want to promote health in the community, this has to be owned by and promoted by the community. And so we are now looking at creating communities for health all over the place. We are trying to get local NGOs, we are trying to work with the government, we are trying to work with the Assam Rifles, we are trying to work with anybody who cares to work with us. And towards this end, we run multiple small and big programs. In Dima Hasao, which is like Meghalaya, difficult to access regions, we are trying to promote the concept of a traveling cancer clinic. We use the ASHA to create awareness, and using a predefined calendar, we go from sub-center to sub-center, trying to reach cancer diagnostics. See, we run the population registry for Dima Hasao. Dima Hasao has a population of about 3 lakhs. And the number of cancers we record? Only about 50 cancers in a year. Even going by national averages of 100 cancers per 100,000 population, we should be seeing 300 cancers. And our area has a much higher incidence of cancer than mainland India. And so what it shows is the number of people who are accessing healthcare for diagnosis is probably very small. And many of them don't even access, medical facilities. And so we are trying to improve the diagnosis, the registration of cancer, in the hope that it will lead to improved treatment and outcomes. Several models, there is no single model for the country or for the region. We have to keep experimenting with different models. But then cancer prevention or health promotion, when you prevent cancer, it is automatically health promotion. And health promotion is a national responsibility which I think is as important as standing on the borders and defending the nation. Only a healthy nation can progress well and do well. Dr. Shanta, the other larger-than-life preceptor that I had used to be very passionate about promoting health, emphasizing early diagnosis. Now, I would very strongly recommend, very strongly urge that when you make decisions in your life on professional choices or for your patients, you make these decisions with your heart and mind. Remember, all of us are defined by the decisions we make. These decisions will often have impacts which are far more than what you would think. My professor often used to say, Ravi Kannan, a bad carpenter will blame his tools for a job not done. We all live in times when things are not perfect. A lot of things are not okay, and we can crib and complain for all we want. But then it is present in every one of us. We can make that difference. Each one of us, must take it upon ourselves to bring about that difference. While we must be on top of cutting-edge technology and science, we must also make sure that we dispense drugs with wisdom and care sparsely, but we must ensure that we dispense time and empathy and understanding and love generously. Because as physicians, as nurses, we will cure occasionally, we will alleviate often, but we must comfort always. I would recommend, I would urge all of you to think with your hearts, to think with your minds, and use your judgment wisely for this. Now, each of us, as I said, has the ability to make a difference. We can shape this world gently. An elderly, a very wise man who once lived, who we all meet, in posters and movies, and of course on the currency note, Indian currency note, said it is better to light a candle than curse the darkness around us. I hope each one of you gets ample opportunities, and when you get the opportunity, I hope you gather the courage to go out and light your own candles. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are truly privileged to have an audience to such a beautiful oration, and I sincerely hope that the oration has instilled in the graduates and postgraduates the importance of being compassionate doctors and nurses. And like sir said, may you use the knowledge that you gained here in NIGRIMS for the welfare of your patients and go out to the world and make a difference. I now invite